Hey guys, Miss Fion here. We're going to go ahead and look at Unit 2, Notes 5. You're going to divide radical expressions now. So again, still using those perfect squares. Make sure you know how to find them because you will not be given them on a test. So you need to make sure that you know how to find this list. I am going to actually change some of these notes here. So we're going to go ahead and follow a different process for solving or dividing radical expressions. So first things first, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and you want to simplify the fraction, okay? So simplify the fraction in that you see underneath the radical. Okay, that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to simplify the fraction that you see underneath the radical. You are then going to take the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. From there, you're going to multiply by the number in the denominator and then simplify, okay? So these steps will work, but let's go ahead and look at an example. So right now what you have is you have the square root of 1 over 5, okay? First things first, I want to know, can I divide 1 over 5 into a nicer number? I cannot. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of the denominator. So when I look at this, the square root of the denominator, so the denominator is the bottom of the fraction, so it's 5. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 5. What that's going to do is then, remember, when you multiply things that are underneath radicals together. So it's going to end up giving me the square root of 5 on top and the square root of 25 on the bottom. From here, you're going to simplify if you can. You should always be able to simplify the bottom because the bottom should always be a number within our list. If it's not, then you did something funky and you need to stop and connect with me. So I know right away the square root of 25 is going to be 5. I'm going to try and simplify the square root of 5 on the top, and I can't. There's no nice perfect square that goes into it, so that's just going to stay the same, and then you're going to be done, okay? The last step is always trying to figure out if you can simplify a fraction. Well, right now this is saying like a 1 over 5. Okay, you don't ever want to look at the radical when you simplify the fractions at the end. 1 over 5, I can't simplify at all, so I know that that's simplified as far down as it can go. Let's look at this one. I have the square root of 12 over 10. So I know right away that both of these I can divide by 2. So that's going to end up giving me the square root of 6 over 5. So from here, I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of the denominator. In this case, it's 5 again. So that's going to give me the square root of 6 times 5 is 30 over the square root of 25. Well, I know, again, the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 30, I can try to break it up. If I do, there's nothing, though, that I can split it into that's going to stay the square root of 30. So right now, it's like saying 1 square root of 30 over 5. I can't simplify 1 over 5. So, again, that's my final answer, and I'm good to go. Here, let's look at number 3 here. I have the square root of 10 thirds. Okay, 10 thirds. So I'm going to try to simplify in here. I have 10 and 3. I cannot divide that by anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and multiply by the square root of the denominator. So when I do that, I'm going to get the square root of 30 over the square root of 9. I know the square root of 9 is 3. And again, the square root of 30 I cannot do anything with, so I'm going to be done with that problem. Hopefully by now you're kind of seeing a pattern. I'm doing the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is going to give me the square root of 9, which is just going to go back to 3. I wonder if you have seen that pattern anywhere. So let's look at this one, square root of 6 over square root of 9. I know that both of these are divisible by 3, so I'm going to divide both by 3 first. It's going to give me the square root of 2 over the square root of 3. So now I need to multiply by what's in the denominator, square root of 3. So that's going to give me the square root of 6 over the square root of 9. I know the square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 6 I cannot simplify, so I'm going to leave that as the square root of 6. Right now, hopefully again, here's that pattern. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 9, which just gets me back to 3. So hopefully you're seeing that pattern and it'll make life a little bit easier in the long run. Here's number 5. Let's take it up a notch. So right now I have the square root of 3x to the third over 8. I cannot simplify that at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of the denominator. That's going to give me the square root of 24x to the third over the square root of 64. So I know right away the square root of 64 is going to give me 8. I'm going to do some side work to figure out what this 24x to the third is going to be. So we're going to do it in 2 separate steps. We're going to do the 24 and we're going to do the x to the third. So 24 I'm going to split into the square root of 4 and the square root of 6, which is going to end up giving me 2 square root of 6. The x's I'm going to write out as 1, 2, 3. Circle your pairs. I have one pair that's going to come out front, square root of x. So if I put these two together, I have the 2 out front and the x out front, and then I have the square root of the 6 underneath and the x underneath. So this whole piece right here is actually just this top number, this thing right here simplified. So that's just what's on top of the fraction. So if you notice, I have a 2 over 8. Both of those are divisible by 2. Okay, so I'm going to divide each of those by 2, which is going to end up giving me 1x square root of 6x divided by 4. Let's look at one more of those tricky ones. So I have the square root of 7x to the 5th divided by 18. I can't simplify 7 over 18, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of the bottom. So we're going to end up with on top the square root of 126x to the 5th divided by the square root of 324. Okay, so following that pattern that I know, 18 times 18 is 324, so the square root of 324 is 18. Okay, that's perfect square. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do some work now. We're going to simplify the square root of 126, and we're going to do the square root of x to the 5th. So we can figure out that top number. So square root of 126, I know that that's going to be the square root of 9 and the square root of 14. So I'm going to be left with 3 square root of 14. X to the 5th, that's 5 x's. I'm going to have 2 pairs. So I'm going to have x squared out front, square root of 1 underneath. So put those two together, I have a 3 out front, I have an x squared out front, I have the square root of a 14 underneath and an x underneath. So that's basically just this 126 simplified. So I'm going to write that up on the top. And now we're going to simplify this fraction that's out front. We never touch anything underneath the radical. So I know that 3 goes into 18 6 times, so I can divide 3 by both of these. So I'm going to be left with 1x squared, square root of 14x, divided by 6. So I know that this assignment is maybe a little bit tricky. It's the same process every time, so once you get that process going, hopefully you feel a little bit more confident. But if you have questions, reach out to me. Let me help you. Good luck.